It was kind of young.
So I'm using a different microphone. This is a built-in microphone on the computer, and hopefully this works. It was working today, a little earlier. So maybe somebody can hear me tonight.
We're in Genesis.
Genesis still.
48.
Yeah. Joseph is a very long story. So, so far we have talked about how the beginning and the end talked about a conflict between two parties.
Mm-hmm.
And then the one step up and then one step back
Uh-huh.
is mentioning mourning. Okay? Yeah, mourning in the Beatitudes is a synonym for repentance. So that's why I put that up there. And then the next section talks about being the firstborn. Okay? And that's also a messianic prophecy because it was vital that Jesus be the firstborn, right? So that he would be descended from the line of kings. And he could be the king of kings in not only a heavenly sense, but in an earthly sense. Because Jesus had to fulfill all the prophecies so that people would recognize him. In hindsight, people can look back and see, well, there's 300 and some different prophecies about the Messiah in the Old Testament, and he fulfills every single one. So now we're getting even closer to the center of the Joseph story, and we're going to see a little something about slaves. So let's pray. Father, we ask your blessing on your word. Ask that you will help us to understand the story of Joseph. We know that it was important because so much was written about Joseph. And we hope that we will see your plan for your Messiah in Joseph's story and also your plan for us. And we ask your blessing on those who are here this evening and those who are with us perhaps online or in spirit. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so Genesis, I don't have it written down up there yet, but 39 verses 1 to 23 will say something about slaves. And after that we'll skip down to chapter 47.
Am I supposed to read all 23 verses?
Well, you want me to shorten it up for you?
I can read all 23 verses if you'd like.
Let me look. Genesis 29.
39.
39.
You're right. Nothing about Joseph in 29. 39. Oh, it's all good. So let's go 1 to 10 first.
1 through 10?
Yeah.
Okay. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites, who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time when he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that is he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her or to be with her.
So we take that as a synonym at first, to lie with her or to be with her. We use both of those as euphemisms for what she really wanted. But here it uses them as two different actions. He would not lie with her, and he would not be with her. So what's the difference between those two?
Lie is to not speak the truth.
No.
No, she's saying lie with me.
Okay.
She wants to take him into the bedroom and lie with her.
Okay.
But he not only will not do that, he will not even be with her. So this is similar to the situation that people in teaching positions especially, and in some corporations find themselves in. You get a lot of ethics training in almost any business nowadays, but especially in education. It's do not even be alone in a room with somebody, because things will be misconstrued. They will make accusations, even if you didn't do anything wrong. Just by being alone with somebody, you can get into trouble, can't you? And this goes way back. When I was doing student teaching at Lanphier, the guy who was the teacher that I was studying under, he told me that very clearly. And this is in the 1980s. He said, don't be alone with a student in the room. Never ever let a student come in the room and close the door. He said, not with a girl and not even with a boy. It doesn't matter. So nowadays it's just got even a lot worse, hasn't it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yes, it's common everyday behavior.
So when it says here that Joseph will not lie with her, well, sure, because he's a godly person. But it also says he won't even be with her. He's not going to be in a room with her where the other servants will look at that and go, oh, what's going on with them? He won't even allow the appearance of it to occur. So this is not just the 1980s. This is well over 3,000 years ago. This is something common to human nature. People of maturity and wisdom should know how to keep themselves out of trouble. And Joseph's doing a pretty good job of it, right? Notice that this follows immediately on that strange story about Judah and his daughter-in-law. That was all in chapter 38. But chapter 37, the very last verse, ended with the Midianites had sold him down to Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and a captain of the guard. And 39, the very first verse, after talking about all that Judah and Tamar stuff, it says, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites. So it's repeating because there was a little interjection of a strange story in there, right? But did you notice anything different about the ending of 37 and the beginning of 39?
Well, here he has just been sold down here. That he's already down there to Egypt.
Well, he was sold in Egypt.
But he was,
We're talking about 37, 36, and 39:1.
in 37, 36,
37, 36.
the Midianites sold him to Potiphar.
And the Midianites did it.
And then over here, the Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar.
So who's the Midianites and the Ishmaelites?
Well, I don't know, but there must have been another exchange of Joseph somewhere along the line there.
Jethro.
Jethro is a Midianite, for sure. Midianites and Ishmaelites are both closely related to Israel. They both descend from the same line of people. But this caravan has multiple people in there, and there's intermarriages, so there's a mixture of people within the caravan, and also the people themselves are mixed. Many of them are from Midian, but many of them are also descended from Ishmael. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, but
So Ishmael went out and became the father of many nations himself, right?
right.
How do you do this if you don't marry people and have kids with them? So he's marrying somebody else, and his kids married other people, and some Midianites were brought into the mix at some point.
Okay.
Yeah, but they said that the Midianites sold him to Potiphar.
There's Midianites
Then
in
they
there.
say that the Ishmaelites sold him.
So they were probably
Potiphar.
Ishmaelites that were related to the
Midian,
Midianites.
Ishmaelites.
Midian is not only a people descended from a certain line of Midian, but it's also a geographical region. Ishmael is a people, but there was never any geographical region that was called Ishmael.
So Ishmaelites could be Midianites.
Well, they could
They
be
lived
descended
there.
from Ishmael, but they could be living in Midian. So that's another way it could be. But there's not any real conflict with there being a caravan of Ishmaelites and Midianites, and the caravan being referred to as both of them. So don't take that as, oh, Moses made a typo, because he probably didn't. He probably knew who they were. Moses is only 4 generations removed from this, remember? So he's probably pretty clear on exactly the whole situation there.
So he was probably a little kid when Joseph was an old man.
I don't think he was that old.
Well, it depends on what you think of every generation.
Did we have Joseph's age somewhere? Was he like
137, wasn't it?
130s? Yeah. Well, if Moses was 80 years old at the time of Exodus, that means it's 320 years into the time in Egypt. A lot more than 137 years into it.
A generation is like 70 years. Right?
It depends on how old your dad was.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
For Moses' line, the average was about 100 years.
Okay.
Because 400 years and he's 4 generations removed. But Moses himself was 80 years old at this time.
Well, I was just looking at it like this. We could take a 4-generation picture with his family. Mom and Jeff, the kids, and the great-grandkids. That's 4 generations.
Mm-hmm.
See, so where I was coming from, it could have been a little kid when this was happening.
Could have been, but
Was it?
I think he's
Oh,
200 years off from Levi.
gotcha. All right, let's continue.
So Levi would have been Moses' great-grandfather? Yeah. So Ishmaelites, are they still around today?
Well, how do we know?
Yeah.
I don't go around. I haven't seen any Ishmaelite immigration.
Who do you think they are, Jeremy? What do we call them today?
Muslims?
Muslims.
Arabs?
Arabs.
Arabs.
Yeah.
The Rechabites are still around. Yeah, they were a people that the prophet Jeremiah
Mm.
prophesied to. They refused to live in the city, but they lived in tents and kept themselves. They were like the Amish of the Israelites. God used them as an example of chastity and obeying rules, and the better ones of the Arabian nations consider themselves to be descendants of the Rechabites.
With the night picture on.
And Israel is still around.
Yeah.
The Chinese claim to go back 5,000 years, of course.
Yeah.
Ultimately, one way or the other, we are all descended from Adam.
Yeah.
So the only question is, have some of the ancient names remained down to this day? That's kind of important to know if you really dive deep into future prophecy, because we get the word that at the end times Gog and Magog will come down and attack Israel. Well, we know who Israel is, but who the heck is Gog and Magog? There's no nation called that.
Russia.
Yeah, Russia.
China.
So we kind of have to know these ancient people, where did they migrate to and who were their descendants? It says that when Israel is attacked in the end times, that Dedan and the young lions of Tarshish will take exception to that. So who's Dedan and Tarshish? Is there any place like that today?
Probably England and us.
Dedan is traditionally thought to be in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. So, the Saudis.
Yemen?
Saudis or Yemen, who lately has been writing peace treaties with Israel.
Saudis, haven't they?
Yeah, United Arab Emirates,
Yeah.
and I think a couple more. Has Jordan been a part of that? But there's been 3 or 4 already that are signing peace treaties, and they say there's more to come. And that's why Trump has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, which just ticks some people off to no end. But
We have a guy from Jordan that just moved into our building, and I don't know why, but it just really surprised me when he started talking about Jesus and that he was a Christian. I said, no, I just assumed he was from Jordan, he was Muslim, but not apparently.
now there are Palestinian Christians and Arab Christians. There's
Or probably Israeli Christians.
there's some Messianic Jews also. They would be Israeli Christians if they live in Israel, if they're Israeli citizens.
Yeah.
But a lot of the Palestinian Christians, whether I guess a lot of them are Eastern Orthodox or maybe Catholic, but a lot of them seem to have retained anti-Semitism. Even though they're Christians, that's kind of foreign to us, right? As American evangelicals, we tend to believe fairly strongly that God made a promise to Abraham, didn't he? And he said that anybody who blesses you will be blessed, anybody who curses you will be cursed, in Genesis chapter 12. And we're like, how can these people be Christians and read their Bible but also hate on Israel like that? So it's a complicated matter. You can't assume that all Christians around the world think like you.
No, but you can't assume that just because you live in a country that you think would be something else, that they're not Christians, because I made that mistake, and
Yeah.
it wasn't true.
Yeah, there's plenty of people from Arab backgrounds that are Christians over there in that region of the world. Because otherwise, who would the caliphate, a couple of years ago, who would they have been persecuting? When they were attacking all the Christians and Yazidis, there were a lot of Christians around them.
Yeah.
They're Syrian Christians, and they are Arabs. So now we have Joseph being sold down the river by his brothers to distant relatives. Okay, these are second and third cousins in this caravan.
So
That
we're
are-
related to Joseph?
Yeah.
Okay.
Remember, Ishmael is descended from Abraham.
Okay.
They take him to Egypt, sell him off there. He goes into the house of a captain of the guard, and what's happening there?
His wife is taking a shine to
But
Yeah.
the Pharaoh, or whoever, I'm assuming
Joseph would have been
Pharaoh,
Moses' great-grand
is
uncle.
prospering because of him. He has no worries. Joseph's got it covered.
Yeah, Potiphar takes him in as a slave, but this isn't an ordinary slave. He quickly realizes that he's got a lot of integrity, right?
Right.
So he gives him more responsibility, and the more he gives to Joseph, the more it prospers. Why is that?
Because God's
God's
blessing him.
favor.
God,
Yeah, God favors Joseph. So,
Joseph was a slave.
yep.
Yeah, he's a slave. Didn't you watch the cartoon, Jeremy?
I thought it was more of
That
a...
we used to have at
he
home.
was a very honored
King of
slave,
Dreams?
but he was a slave.
There,
I thought it was more of a servant.
A servant is a slave.
Oh.
a slave is in the old times. This is really old. This is somebody who just works for somebody else, and they don't happen to get paid usually.
An unpaid employee?
But they're completely taken care of, too.
Yeah, they get
Yeah.
room and board and clothes.
They're taken care of, but they're slaves and they're slaves. You don't want to be a slave in the copper mines, right?
Okay.
But a household slave very often can be treated just like one of the family. Just because he has the title of slave and he's not getting paid doesn't mean he's chained to a wall all the time and getting beaten all the time. In ancient times, especially in the Roman Empire, probably when you walk down the street, every fourth person you pass is a slave. And they're out there walking around in the street and doing business, either for their master or for themselves. Some slaves would earn up enough money in order to buy back their own freedom. How could they do that if they were not allowed to do business and own possessions?
Mm-hmm.
So a slave is maybe not quite the stigma that you're thinking it is.
They didn't duel each other for entertainment?
Remember back when people were coming to America and it cost so much to be here, and somebody would sponsor them and they would pay their way, and then they had to work until they got money off. What was that called?
Indentured servant.
Indentured servant. That's kind of
Oh.
more of a...
Indentured servants work without pay for 7 years and then they're supposed to get free. A lot of Irish came to America as indentured
Well,
servants.
they're working to...
Which is just a slave by another name.
Right.
I mean, they're working to pay off their debt.
Either that or they were sentenced to it.
Yeah.
For a petty crime back in England.
Yeah.
We sentence you to be an indentured servant in America. Get out of here. So they go to America, they're sold off on an auction block like any other slave, but with the understanding that you have them for 7 years and you have to give them up after that time. I think
I just thought slaves weren't treated well.
Now I think that the first black slave in America who was an indentured servant and then his master refused to free him after his time was up. I think maybe the master was also a black person. That's an old story, but I have to review it again to be clear on that. But there were some black people who came over as an indentured servant early on also, and they were freed. Like the Irish and some other people who were criminals. Anyway, he is a slave, and that puts him on a kind of a difficult footing. Even though God favors him and Potiphar favors him, it puts him on a difficult footing, because if you get into an argument with a free person, especially the owner's wife, you don't have as much standing as she does in the eyes of the law.
No, that's true.
So he's in shaky ground here. Do you think she's a lot older than he is?
I think so.
Well, she's pretty aggressive anyway, isn't she? But she's not necessarily older. She's just very sure of herself. She could be a lot younger than her husband Potiphar.
This is true.
But Joseph is a very handsome guy. He's in her house, and Potiphar is absent a lot, and she's going to take advantage, right? All right, let's read a little bit more. Verse 11 to 23.
Are we still in 39?
Yes.
Yeah.
One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, "Come to bed with me." But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. "Look," she said to them, "this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house." She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the story. That Hebrew slave you brought to us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me." He burned with anger.
Yeah, I'll bet. Husbands don't like hearing things like that, do they?
No.
Nope.
All right. 4 more verses.
Yes, 623.
20.
623.
Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those men in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did.
Okay. So, exactly the same phrase is used here from Potiphar to the jailer, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to worry about anything that they put under his care, because you give it to Joseph, it's taken care of, it's done, right?
You would have thought Potiphar would have thought of that before he threw him in the prison.
Well,
Using a
it's
bit of
nice to have your
brain.
stuff taken care of, but
That
you don't
was
want your
brain.
wife taken care of
Yeah.
by him. Even if Potiphar understood that his wife might have been part of the problem with it, still, Joseph is always going to be an issue with her in that house.
Right.
Even if it was her fault or not, he's getting rid of Joseph. So the Potiphar is not being a fool here. He's doing basically what he has to do. But this woman here, she gives new meaning to the word clingy woman, doesn't she?
Hussy. Clean woman.
She's clingy.
Clean.
She gets hold of clothes and hangs on to them.
Mhm.
So as soon as she got that cloak, she wasn't letting go of it because she intended all along to use it as evidence, didn't she?
I think she even knew he wouldn't, and he would run out. That's why she hung on to it to come off.
Mm-hmm. Anything else you see there? So all of this is a description of slavery. Here on the first half of the story, we see Joseph as a slave.
Mhm.
We have a description of his life as a slave. Is it a good life?
Seems to be, for the most part.
Well, God makes it as good as you can expect for being a slave, but slaves have inconveniences in their life. Things like masters and masters' wives that might take advantage. Things like prison where you get sent when you don't want to be. I don't imagine an Egyptian prison was a nice place to be.
Yeah.
For one thing, if you're in prison, you always have the threat of a death sentence hanging over your head. If they start running out of room in that prison, it's like, okay, who can we get rid of today? You and you, come out, you're losing your heads. So, slavery is, it's not as bad as you might think, but it's not a good situation. And Joseph was in it. He was a slave for a number of years. This goes on for a long, long time. He was a teenager when he was sold down into Egypt. He's not a teenager any longer by the end of this story. Now let's skip over and look at 47. Chapter 47, starting in verse 13.
How far you want to go?
Let's see. Almost to the end. Let's see. 13 to 20. Let's start with that.
Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into the Pharaoh's house. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Then Joseph said, "Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock, if the money is gone." So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. When that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There is nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of the Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. Oops,
One more.
I lost my place. Turned 3 pages. Then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for every man of the Egyptians sold his field, because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became the Pharaoh's.
What is money?
An item of exchange.
Money in economic terms is something that allows you to store value, exchange value, and divide value. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it could be anything. There are people on some Polynesian islands, I forget what the name of the island is, they use huge boulders for money. So if you want to buy something from somebody, you got to roll this huge boulder over to their house, you know. And if you see somebody that's got a hut down there on the beach with, 25 boulders around it, I guess he's a rich person. But that's not very convenient money, because it's not portable, right? So let's say all of us are in a society up here at the top of the hill overlooking Riverside, and we're living in little grass huts. We have nothing, right? But we need to have food to eat, and we have discovered that the most convenient food to eat is grass seeds. So there's a wild wheat that grows around here in the area, has this great big grains, on it, and we go hunting around in the woods and fields looking for this stuff, and we collect it, and bring it back home, and grind it up and make our bread with it. That's what we do all the time. So the best fields maybe are over there in Sherman, all right?
The best fields are in Sherman?
Yeah, there's lots of them over there.
Okay.
That's the best place to go collecting it. So every couple of days we all hike over to Sherman. It's a long walk without a car, and we collect as much seed as we can, collect in our baskets or whatever we have, and bring it back home. We eat that for a couple of days, then we have to go back. But one day we come back home, and Jeremy is looking at the seeds in his basket, and he's going, I'm kind of running low on seeds here. I'm going to have to make a trip over to Sherman again. And he goes, wait a minute. Seeds? Seeds? Duh. So one day we're all heading over to Sherman, and we say, Jeremy, come with us. We're going to Sherman to get some more wheat seeds. And he says, don't need to. We say, what, are you going to starve? He says, no, got my own wheat field out back here. Because Jeremy's been planting wheat seeds, right? So now we have the first
saleable crop.
the first component of an economy is usually agriculture. And before you know it, every one of us has a wheat field behind our house, because we figured this out, right? So, we still have to go other places because there are other tribes around that they produce other things that we would like to have that's better than the things we produce. Like there's a tribe down in Chatham that makes really nice footwear. They have these cool sandals with beads on them and all this stuff. So, since we have agriculture, we have a lot of extra wheat now. So every once in a while we take a long hike all the way down to Chatham.
Where else is food we got? Go by yours.
We take them some of our wheat and we trade them for their sandals that they make. We've got a trade going on, right? But that's a long trek to go down there. So it would be better if we could carry more at one time, right?
Yeah, so Lonnie builds a leader.
Or stay home and let them
Well,
come to you.
Lonnie comes running in one day and says, "Hey guys, come and help me. I found a wild ox. We're gonna eat it." So I guess he was out taking photographs and found this ox somewhere.
Yeah.
We all run out there with him and we find this ox, a couple miles away. We're like, "Great, let's kill it." And Lonnie goes, wait, no, hang on. If you kill it, we have to pick it up and carry it back. But if you don't kill it, we can make it walk back, and then we can kill it there, right? Because Lonnie's thinking.
Yeah.
Lonnie says, let's just make it walk back.
Genius.
So we're walking back with the ox, and it isn't really happy to go, but we've got ropes on it. We're dragging it along. And by the time we get back here to home, Lonnie says, "Wait a minute. I kind of like this ox. The way he looks at me is, let's not kill it." And so Lonnie and the ox become friends, and now wherever they go, Lonnie's got an ox following them around. When we go down to Chatham, Lonnie says, "My ox will help you out." So we stack up all the wheat on the ox's back. We carry that all down there. We stack a bunch of sandals on it to bring it all back. And life gets much easier because now we have the second part.
Of transportation?
Yep. Agriculture and transportation.
Well, while you all are doing that, I'll be down at the river getting us some fish.
So Monica goes down looking for some fish in the river, and she comes back and she says, "I found something really cool in the river. I found these little white, or not white, little yellow stones that are really, really shiny. Okay, and it's soft. You bite it, it makes an indent into it. I've never seen this substance like this before, and it's really hard to find, but there's some of it down there." And she starts making jewelry out of it, and finds out that we can trade that for a whole lot more sandals than wheat, So instead of carrying 10 great big baskets of wheat, you just carry a few little pieces of gold, and they like that just as much.
So it's not ferrous?
It's not iron, no, it's gold. And you can work with it pretty easily, you can hammer it out, you can melt it down, you can make lots of cool stuff with it.
Oh, iron
But
pirates.
Iron. Gold. Now we need money.
now we've got all three elements of an economy. Money, in order to be very suitable and effective, it should be lightweight and portable. Right? A great big stone is not very effective because if you got to roll it all the way to Chatham, you're in trouble, even with an ox, right?
You just chip off part of it and throw the pebbles in your pocket. Change.
Yeah, maybe. You can do that with gold because gold you can melt it together and
But it's heavy.
you can make it bigger or you can make it smaller. Money should be dividable, it should be portable, and it should be durable. If you keep your wheat for a couple of years, It's gonna rot, right?
Moldy wheat.
But gold never rots. So it's got all the elements of good money. Now here in Joseph's time, they did not have money.
They would have to come up with some sort of standard.
You know when money was invented?
It was in Egypt, wasn't it? No, it was
Was it
in,
Greece, wasn't it?
the
Greek
what
Rome?
was the name of that one?
It was in Lydia.
Was it Lydia?
Yeah. King Croesus of Lydia in about 700 AD.
I was going to say China.
He had the clever idea of taking this gold that we've been using as a trade item. He said, what if I take this and mint it with my face on it, and now people won't have to weigh it. Because if you bring somebody a bunch of gold, then they have to bring out their scales and weigh it, and then you have to bring out your scales and weigh it because you don't trust their scales. It gets to be a complicated negotiation. But if you got a coin that is stamped with a recognizable design, everybody agrees this is worth a certain amount. And King Croesus of Lydia became the richest man of his day, which is why we say, rich as Croesus. You ever heard that expression?
I thought it was as rich as Midas, but
Well, Midas is a mythological figure, but
Okay.
Croesus was a real guy.
where is Lydia?
It's on the coast of what's Turkey nowadays. So with the invention of gold money, Croesus turned Lydia into an empire. But back here in this day, in Genesis 47, you don't have any money yet.
Right.
You have all the elements of an economy. They do have agriculture, they got transportation, there's livestock, and they trade things around the world. But the best trade item they have is silver and gold.
Yeah,
And in
yeah.
certain times in ancient Egypt, silver was actually more valuable than gold. Because it's more difficult to find and smelt and deal with.
So they had money in Egypt?
No.
Well, then why did it say that Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house?
Whatever they had to trade with, that's what we're calling money.
Okay,
But the actual word money there is a later construct.
okay.
This is about 1,000 years before money was invented. What they're thinking of as money would be trade items. Like in Solomon's day, you'll see descriptions later on of Solomon sending out trade ships, and what did they bring back? Spices, ivory, peacocks,
Yeah.
and monkeys, I think. A lot of strange trade items from around the world he brought in. But it's so much more difficult to deal with this trade if you don't have a recognizable unit of money where everybody is using the same amount. But they did it. And what he is using for money here, understand, the primary thing that everybody needs, and they're going to die without it, is wheat. So when you hear buy and sell in this chapter, you should think of the word trade. Does that make sense? So they come in, they're starving to death, and we know how Joseph worked out this whole deal of having wheat where nobody else had wheat, right?
Yep.
You remember the 7 years of plenty and 7 years of famine thing? Since he had previous knowledge of what was going to happen from the Pharaoh's dream, he just saved it up. So we're going to not waste it during the years of plenty. We're going to save it. And a year or two into the famine, everybody's coming to him. What do you think?
I'm thinking, how did he store the wheat without it going bad?
Grain being dug into the ground.
Well, you get a little bit even during a famine year. You put that on top and you take the old stuff out of the bottom, so you're rotating.
They invented refrigeration.
In a very dry climate like Egypt, and if there's a famine, it's because there's a drought. You know, so it's not getting rained on.
Okay.
The main thing you got to do is keep the mice out of it. But you got plenty of labor to keep mice out.
Well, they had cats. I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, they had cats in Egypt.
The cats don't change. They always like a mouse.
They didn't worship cats, did they?
I don't know.
I think they
Depends
did.
if you've been watching the Mummy movie.
Oh, I think some of the did.
There were cat statues. They were pretty prominent, so that they probably considered them some valuable spirit animal. I'm not sure. Anyway, they come in, they're starving, they need to get the wheat. What are they going to do to get wheat from Joseph?
Bring whatever they got. And when it comes wrong,
What they
bring
start
them
with
back.
is the common trade items, which would be portable silver and gold, right? They're calling that money. Even though there's no minted coinage at the time, my jewels, my gold, my silver,
Like candlesticks.
yeah. The silver candlesticks.
Grandma's silver serving set.
This is money, okay?
Isn't that right?
They bring all of that portable stuff in and trade it. Verse 14 says he gathered up all of the money,
Mm-hmm.
but think trade items and primarily silver and gold.
And they jump into the livestock.
A year or two later, they got no more of that. They're totally destitute. They come and ask him for wheat. They say, give us bread, for why should we die? I got nothing to give you, but you got to give me something, right? And he said, got any livestock? Got an ox? I'll take Lonnie's ox. I'll give you some bread for that.
There was rocks. Lonnie, you just found it.
Yeah.
And you were so
Sheep,
close.
goats, maybe not cats, but anything that's considered livestock that would be valuable,
Chickens.
they had to bring that in. I believe chickens come from India. I don't know that they would have had chickens in ancient Egypt.
Well, I'm taking them chickens, right?
Chicken is Indian?
Yep. That's Indian food. They brought everything they had. Horses are mentioned here,
Yep.
Donkey.
and donkeys. Donkeys were a primary transport throughout the Middle East at this time. If this is around 1700 BC, then it would be another 700 years before camels were domesticated. So you should not see camels mentioned in here. Moses in 1400 BC writing this, he would still not have known camels as livestock.
They just ran around like deer.
Yep. So after that, all their livestock is gone. We got nothing. And they said, why should we die? What are they going to offer now?
Themselves.
Oh, yeah.
By us
So they got
and
nothing.
our land.
Yep.
You understand what happened here?
They
They
sold themselves into slavery.
Yep. So, we have, in the first leg of this story, we have Joseph being sold as a slave into Egypt. In the last part of this story, we have Joseph selling all of the Egyptians into slavery. You see how that parallels?
Yeah.
In some ways, the beginning of the story is similar to the ending, but in other ways, it's kind of an opposite. Joseph is no longer a slave. He is now the master of all of them, including people like Potiphar. Potiphar used to own Joseph. Now Joseph owns Potiphar and his wife.
I wonder what he did with that.
I'd have put it in jail.
Well, we know that Joseph married an Egyptian and had 2 children with her, Manasseh and Ephraim, right? Since he owns everybody in Egypt, do you think he's probably going to select the prettiest Egyptian girl?
I would think so.
Yeah, it's not Potiphar's wife. No. But he's going to find the best of the best in the land because he owns everything and everybody.
Joseph does or the Pharaoh does?
Well, the Pharaoh owns it through Joseph. But it was Joseph's wisdom that made all of this happen. We know, historically speaking, that prior to the time of Joseph, that the Pharaoh was not an all-powerful ruler. He was kind of a minor king. And Egypt was run by a series of governors. There was, a couple of dozen governors from north to south Egypt, and they had all the power. And the Pharaoh was, nominally over them, and they kind of gave him obedience, kind of, sort of. But an overturn happened in Egyptian society, and historians don't understand that if they don't believe the Bible, which a lot of historians don't believe this, But the Bible tells us exactly how it happened.
Yeah.
At the end of this period, the Pharaoh was all-powerful. He was a god king, and he owned everything. All of the land belonged to him, and the people belonged to the land, therefore they were the property of the Pharaoh. That all happened within less than a century. And this was the century that Joseph lived. So, history corroborates exactly what the Bible tells us happened.
But they won't either.
They started out at the beginning of this period, free people with just a nominal loyalty to the king. And at the end of this period, they all belonged to the king. They were serfs on the land, and the land was owned by the crown. It's very much like peasant serfs in Russia at the end of the Tsarist age. There have been a lot of periods in history where a king was all-powerful and he just owned everything, but nothing exceeds ancient Egypt at this time. Pretty amazing that a slave ended up enslaving an entire nation. So, you got any questions about any of that?
Did the Pharaoh still think of Joseph as a slave?
I doubt it. He owes all of his power now to Joseph.
Oh, Joseph's essentially his executive officer. People who truly understand what an economy is and the 3 legs of an economy can utilize that knowledge to become wealthy. Nobody understood this better than Joseph did. This is very ancient knowledge.
I'm still going fish. We'll have fish that week. Okay.
Well, I'm going to shut this off and we'll go to prayer time.